Welcome, everyone, to episode 3 of The Secret Podcast. It's been a big month with a lot of publicity and a lot of new people coming into the fold. We would like to welcome all of you into the madness and best of luck. We would also like to encourage you to listen to the first 2 episodes of this podcast and, most importantly, get a copy of the book and read it. There's a lot of collective data out there on the hunt, and not all of it is helpful. It's important that you read the book and understand how the hunt works, how the clues work, and decide for yourself how much of the online information you want to believe. There are several sites out there, and they all have information and theories on them, but the only sure answer is to dig up a cask. And I guarantee you that if anyone online had a sure answer, they would have dug up a cask by now. The best thing that you can do if you aren't in a city with a cask buried in it is to read the book and examine the puzzles, all of them, not just the one closest to you. Figure out the methods BP uses to give clues and how they work by looking at the solved cities. Figure out the instructions on how to do the puzzle. The biggest mistake you can make is to start in the middle of the puzzle. Another thing I'd like to address is digging without permission. A member of our team was recently contacted by the Parks Department in his city asking him if he had been digging. They were very unhappy about holes being put in a park without permission. This isn't 1984. Well, it's more like George Orwell's 1984. We live in a surveillance state. When you put a 3-foot hole in the ground in a park, people are going to notice, and you may get fined and ruin any chances for future people with real solutions to have a chance to recover a cask. I know you want to think that you have the whole thing solved in a day, but I'm here to tell you, you don't. Digging holes without permission, claiming you found a cask with no proof, and telling people that you know the solutions but refuse to discuss them is all poison for the well. And continuing behavior like this has no other aim than to ruin the hunt altogether. It would be wise not to continue with such behavior. We shouldn't have to scold people like they're 10-year-olds, but if you want to act that way, it's a climate you're choosing to put yourself into. We can only assume that you're trying to ruin the hunt for everyone. There are ways to get permission and to do things correctly. It would be wise to take those paths moving forward. I'm not going to tell people what to do. I'm just saying it's not a good idea to keep this up. Because of our awesome co-host, George Ward, we have a Facebook site for the podcast now where you can ask questions and participate in discussions regarding the remaining casks. It's Shhh, The Secret Podcast on Facebook. All you have to do is search S and then 3 H's, The Secret Podcast, and you'll find it. You can also post questions and requests for upcoming episodes there if there's something you want to discuss or you want to have us break down or you have a question about something, post it up there. We'll get to it on the podcast or a member of our team will answer it for you. This month we're talking about the second cask found, the one in Cleveland, and we're honored to have Brian Zinn and Andy Abrams, the 2 individuals who dug up the Cleveland cask in 2004, on the show with us. You might also remember seeing them on the recent episode of Expedition Unknown, and hopefully we'll get to discuss some of that as well later on in the episode. But right now, let's just jump into things with Cleveland and welcome Brian and Andy to the show. You guys are known for finding the cask in Cleveland in 2004. Let's go back a little bit before that. How did you get involved with the book in the first place? When did you first find it or pick it up or learn about it?
I bought the book in a bookstore when it came out in 1982. I believe I was a freshman in college down in Philadelphia. I went to Penn, which is coincidentally where Byron Price went as well. I bought the book. I love puzzles and that kind of stuff, and I got hooked.
And how long did you mess around with it before you put it down, or did you ever put it down? Did you keep messing with it for the entire time from the time you got it till 2004?
I messed with it the entire time I was in college. I thought that there was a cask in Philadelphia, and I got absorbed with the picture, which coincidentally turned out to be the Cleveland picture. I got obsessed with it. I could go into all my crazy ideas, but I would go into downtown Philadelphia. I would go into the Penn Library looking up star charts and historic things, and I would do this on a weekly basis. Then when I graduated college, I packed all my stuff away, ended up going to law school up in Boston. Even though the pictures were burned in my mind and the verses were burned in my mind, for example, if I'm walking down the street and I see something that looks like something from the picture, I'd be looking around a little. But I didn't open the book. I had lost track of where I had put the book. Went to law school, ended up graduating law school, got a job in New Jersey, and I got married and had some kids. And taking up a lot of time on the podcast, I don't know at what point. And,
so a little life got in the way, and then basically you, was it when you found Quest for Treasure that you kind of really got into it seriously again?
oh no. What happened is that a few years before Quest for Treasure even started with The Secret, I had found the book. We had just moved into a different place in New Jersey, and I was unpacking my college stuff, my college box, and there was the book. And I picked it up, and I looked through it, and I just got the fever again. And I remember reading that at some point they were going to publish the solutions in a second book. So I went and looked up to see if the second book of The Secret was published, and it wasn't, and there was nothing on The Secret. So I tried to contact Byron Price and the publishing company to find out what the solutions were and if they ever published it. I figured the hunt was over. The solutions must have been published years ago, and I was dying to find out where everything was.
Did you write them a letter or call them? Or?
Yes, I wrote them a letter. I sent them a fax. They wouldn't respond. They wouldn't respond to me.
He sent the man a fax.
Yeah. I still saved the fax. I still have it. And I sent him a nice letter explaining what I just explained to you, where are the solutions. Didn't get a reply. And I couldn't get past the receptionist. She just said, he'll call you back. And he never did. Then I ran into Andy. Andy joined my law firm where I was. What year did you join, Andy? Do you remember?
Came back to New Jersey in the early 2000s, I guess.
So it must have been around the year 2000 or 2001 when Andy shows up. And Andy's very good at talking himself into and out of many things. I basically showed him the book, tried to explain it. I take it that's the first time Andy had ever seen or heard of The Secret. He says, give me the book. We're going to call Byron Price, after I explained it all.
Well, hold on. That wasn't you. This was over a period of months, because first you came into my office, and you have to understand that Brian was kind of known at the law firm for being a master waster of time. We had to bill at the firm, and he was constantly going through diversions and puzzles and video games and things and it was a black hole time suck if you went into his office. And I was totally victim to that. So he walks into my office one day, goes, hey, start telling me about this thing. You did college and how, you remember this, Brian? You would go out. If you went out at midnight on a certain night, on a certain day of the month, and you stood at a certain place, you would see something. And I just looked at him.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like he was out of his mind. I'm thinking, that's what you did in college? So, the first couple times through, I was sort of impenetrable in terms of being sucked in, because I knew if I did, well, I don't think I ever anticipated I'd be talking about it 17 years later. But the first few times, I kind of dismissed him out of hand. Then he came to my office one day, and you can take it from there, Brian.
Well, I got you into other things too, like playing Zork online and stuff like that.
Oh.
He enriched my life measurably.
All right, so Andy's the charmer finds a way to get a hold of BP.
He says, all right, we'll try and call him. So he gets on the phone with the receptionist, and he just says, Byron Price, please. And she says, hold on. And Byron Price gets on the phone, and Andy hands me the phone.
It's like that scene from Ferris Bueller's Day Off where he hands him the phone, talk to Rooney. All right. So you talk to him, and he says, according to the art, I'll just paraphrase so we can move along a little bit. So he says to you, as far as I'm concerned, the game is still on, and that's what gets you kind of excited about trying to find a cask for yourself at that point.
Absolutely. And also at that time, we had the internet. It was a little bit primitive, but it was still there. So I start searching for things. And lo and behold, at some point around 2003, I think it was, I find a post by Fox saying, anybody out there who's ever heard of The Secret? I was amazed, and I joined the group, and we started talking, and the rest is history.
Let's go back to that time period, say early, 2003. Quest for Treasure is there. There's a thread for The Secret, which, it looks like you and Fox and a few other people created most of the pages or the threads on there, the initial ones. There's kind of this climate of everybody's trying to do what they can to figure things out. Bits and pieces of information are coming in about, what people are finding inside the images and what they could mean and all that. And you decide that you're looking for, and Matt told the story that he was looking for the Chicago cask in Washington, D.C. So these things are extremely ambiguous. And you were saying that you were looking for what you thought was in Philadelphia, what was the cask for Image 4. You're snooping around Philadelphia, and then what happened? Had you planned to take a trip to Philly already, or did you plan the trip out after the I just want you to go over the incident with Johan and the message board and what had come up kind of at the last moment that caused you to head to Cleveland.
The picture has an L and a bell in it, implying Liberty Bell. It has a strange-looking picture that could be a lion or the face of Ben Franklin. The jewel is in a keystone, and Pennsylvania is known as the Keystone State. So almost everything, and there are tons of arches that look like the arch in the picture in Philadelphia. So, yeah, I was heavily into looking at Philadelphia from the internet, and almost everyone on Q4T, the bulletin board website, also thought that it was in Philadelphia. We didn't know which verse went with it. What we did is we started searching for words and things like that on Google or whatever, and I had typed in Socrates, Pindar, Apelles from one of the verses, and nothing came up. Nothing interesting came up.
Right.
And about a month later, Johan posts that he did the exact same thing, and something did come up. It turns out that a new website had just posted something on the Cleveland Cultural Gardens. And they said on the wall of the Cleveland Cultural Gardens are these names of famous Greek people. And Socrates, Pindar, and Apelles came up, and Google caught it. When you click on the link, you start to see the picture of the garden, the front of the wall. And as soon as I saw that, that picture was burned in my mind. I knew that was Cleveland. And then you start searching around at other things in the cultural gardens, and in the Italian cultural garden is the fountain with the thing that looks like Ben Franklin's face. And it was more than one aha moment.
You corral Andy, and you both get permission from your better halves to go on this adventure to Cleveland. 9 hours.
Right.
And
Right.
Andy's late getting to your house. That's the way the story goes.
We're actually at the Borgata in Atlantic City, and we're in a bar, and I want to show you this. I'm going to show you this. I said, well, I just have a drink. No, we're with a bunch of guys. And he starts pulling out pictures of the Cleveland Cultural Gardens and the wall and the columns. and he's tying it and he's showing me, and it's seek the columns for the search, and his aha moment transfers over to me, and I don't want to be at the Borgata anymore. I want to be in Cleveland. I can't believe what he's showing me, because if it really is true, then he has the spot, he has the place, and there's only so much you can glean from the picture. You really know you have to be there if you're ever going to have a chance to see it through. So now there's this buzz, and I can't get it out of my mind, and I'm reading everything I possibly can. There's a fever pitch, and he says, I'm going to go, I'm planning a trip to Cleveland. And yeah, I said to my wife, my friend Brian from work wants to take a trip to Cleveland. And she goes, uh-huh. And I said, he's wants to look for this treasure we've been talking about. She goes, uh-huh. And I said, she goes, how are you going to get there? You're not going to fly. I said, no, it's not going to cost any money. No, we'll split the gas. She said, when are you going? I said, Friday. And she said, She goes, Sunday is Mother's Day. And I said, yeah, I've got 2 little kids. I know Brian has kids. She goes, you do whatever you want. You just better be home by Sunday morning for Mother's Day. And I said, yeah, that's fine. So I get to his house. We drive all night. And he drives all night. He is so wired up.
I drove 9 hours to Cleveland and 9 hours back in basically a 24-hour period.
Yeah. Yeah. As we got, I remember driving through, and that's a miserable drive through the state of Pennsylvania on Route 80, because it just goes forever. And then when it turned to Ohio and we thought we were finally going to be really close, everybody's using, what was that? MapQuest, right? It gave us another hour and 10 minutes. We were going to pull this up. We almost quit there. So we get to the hotel around, 3 o'clock in the morning, and we check in, and we know we have limited time. This is what I remember. We check into the hotel. I'm exhausted. I had already slept in the car. He's not sleeping at all. I fall asleep for a few hours. I think he stays up, continues to read over everything he's ever researched, because we know we have one shot.
We're under the gun.
We have one
basically on the clock. We're under the gun.
And we had set a drop dead time of like 6 o'clock to leave, because that's the only way we could make it back and make breakfast in bed for our wives, So that was going to be quitting time. And so we get up at 7:30, I think, and we go to check out. I remember the woman says to me, all right, are you checking in? I said, no, checking out. She goes, when did you get here? I said, about 3 hours ago. So she looks at me. Here comes Brian walking over in these tube socks pulled up to his knee and these shorts, and this kind of pink salmon shirt. And she kind of looks at me. I go, he's not my, because she gave me this look like we don't rent rooms by the hour. I said, we're not, he's not my boyfriend. So he walks over to check out, and she goes, so what are you guys doing in Cleveland today? I'm going to check out the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And Brian whips out a map. He goes, actually, we're going to check out the cultural gardens. And I go, oh, he is my boyfriend. I lied. There's no way around it. So we check out, drive to the gardens.
Not yet. Hold on. We go to McDonald's to get breakfast, and we end up getting lost on the way to the garden.
Yeah, not a good sign of things to come. But I do remember when we got there, we were like little kids. This was something he'd been studying for 23 years. This was something that got crammed into me over a much shorter period of time, but the excitement level was crazy. And the newspaper guy comes and meets us, and there's a photographer named Marvin, and they're looking at him and me, and like we're the smartest guys in the room, and they want to be part of this. So I remember turning the corner with Brian and seeing the wall and the columns, and I remember it was like Christmas morning, like kid waking up.
We parked right near the columns, and I got out of the car, and I just had to take it all in. The columns and the wall, this was something that had been burned in my mind for years and years. I said hello to the reporter and the other guy, and then I said, just a minute, I have to go check something out. And I ran over to the Italian gardens to see the fountain and everything else. And to tell you the truth, that made the whole trip right then and there, just seeing everything for real.
You went over and you saw the arch, you saw the fountain, the lion's head that kind of spits water out of it, right?
Into the half shell, right.
We had solved the puzzle right then and there. Even if we didn't find the treasure, that's how I felt.
I got a question for you. So you arrive there, you're on site, you see the wall, you see the columns, you're looking around. and you notice, because all this stuff, even though it is somewhat close together, it's not all crammed into one area. You have to walk, a few yards over to the Italian gardens, and you have to walk around the area a little bit. And there's a lot of little plots of space there, rectangular plots, if you will, all over the place. So what was it that made you go to the back of that wall versus any other rectangular plot that you could find in the area? Because you had an arch, you had a fountain, you had all kinds of things that matched the image. What was it about the wall that drew you to that spot? Because it is kind of uncanny that out of all the spots you could have dug, you guys picked the right one.
Right. Well, in the 9-hour car ride on the way over, there were a few things that we didn't know the answer to. The biggest one was 7 steps up you can hop. There is no back of the wall on the internet. It just wasn't there. We'd had no idea what it meant, so we just had to keep looking around until we could figure it out. We were walking around behind the wall. Andy, I think, was the first one to see, the 7 steps leading up from down. There was a big steep hill behind the wall.
Also, though, when we got out of the car, you're in a place where the author has been because all the visual identifiers are there. So he was here. Those columns in the wall, there's no question. And as you walk through the columns towards the wall, there's a huge grass rectangular plot. When I saw that, I think when we both saw that, our first idea was, well, it must be in that grass. And that was the front side of the wall, and that's what's pictured. So it made the sense, and it says in a rectangular plot. So before we ever went to the back, John, in our estimation, it was going to be in the front, but it was like 60 by 90. It was a pretty big plot of land. And I'm thinking, they're never going to let us dig this entire thing up. So we're going to have to figure out where. So as we're scouting that spot, a guy comes over with the truck, and they start setting up white chairs on the lawn. And we looked at the guy and said, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "We're setting up for a wedding." And we said, "What do you mean you're setting up a wedding?" He said, "Well, there's a wedding here at 12 o'clock. And that's about 9:30 in the morning. And we realized, wait a second, we just drove 9 hours. We're so pumped up, and they're going to have a wedding. And there's just no way they're going to let us dig the ground during, people taking vows." Right. And so now there's this, oh my God, we picked the wrong day, right? Like, what did we do? And we're devastated. So that's the roller coaster ride. Like, we're so up with the columns in the wall, and then the chairs are being set up, and right then it's over, right? But we start scouting around, and I remember we walked to the back of the wall because we wanted to see the road that curved. That was Martin Luther King Drive. Yeah, Brian, I can't remember.
Well, it was Liberty. It ended up being Liberty.
Liberty, yeah. Right. Yeah. And that was the road that curved beneath two countries. So now we're on the backside of the wall, which, right, until you get there, you would never find, there were no pictures of it, nothing even on the internet. So we're sitting there and we're kind of wrapping our head around the fact that, now by process of elimination, we can't even dig by the huge rectangular plot. And we start to notice that this area, unlike the front, has steps. This area has a sunken pit area where you have to walk up, and we start walking it. And lo and behold, it's 1, 2, 3. We get to 6, and we're right in front of this huge rectangular flower planter. And now we both look at each other like, wait a second, because this last one, you can't just walk, you got to hop up on it. And so again, we're plugged in, we're pumped up, we're like, it's here, it's got to be here. I don't know what, ultimately how you got to get lucky, sure. If they hadn't set up chairs in the front, we may have spent an inordinate amount of time in the front trying to calculate things, but something kind of helped us and pushed us to the back. And once we got there and you saw the layout, it made a lot more sense.
What you're saying is there's a small set of stairs in front of the planter, and then there's a patio, and this is going from the bottom of the stairs up towards the plot where you've dug. So there's the set of stairs, there's a small little patio of cement, and then there's another stair or two.
I think it's almost like a bench in front of...
Okay, so it goes right to the bench. There's what looks like a kind of a big stone bench, and then the planter is up behind the bench area. And the bench would actually be the 6th step of the little group that you're going.
You got
And then you've got the patio and then the 5 other little steps.
Okay,
Right.
so it was 5 steps, and then the patio, and then the bench, and then the plot was right behind the bench area.
right. That patio is flat. I think you walk down 3 steps to get to the patio area, but once you're there, you wind up walking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps up. The 6th step up, as you said, is that plateau kind of table area in front of the flower pot.
Yeah.
And the 7th, then, if you're standing on that ledge, you can hop up onto the top of that long, big flower.
And you're standing behind the wall right there.
You got it. Exactly.
And I think because we had that clue in our mind, because we couldn't solve that one, 7 steps up you can hop, that's what we were looking for. You know, you go up 5 little steps, and we wanted to find 6 and 7, and we did.
Here comes the tricky part, and this is what it has been a subject of debate. We've talked about it. It's been brought up many a times. It's the one thing that we still can't be 100% sure of. So if you're coming at the back of the wall from that direction, and you're trying to count stones per how he describes you to count them in the verse, you're going to end up a completely polar opposite of where you should be digging to find the cask, right?
Yeah,
That's right. And that's where I dug for 5 hours.
So, yeah, as the story goes, you tore up that whole entire piece of land there, just like Chicago. At the very end, you got totally fed up, and then Andy went over and kind of stuck the pole in the ground and hit something. And why don't you tell us how it went? Digging for 5 hours. The wedding's probably come and gone. It's getting close to, 6. You're going to have to get back. How do things turn for the better?
as we're digging, and he counted it out. He had the shovel. I was the videographer. I wanted to capture this moment for him. I know it's been 20 years, so he counts that facing the wall. We count from right to left or whatever it was, the number over, and we count 10 down. It's exactly 10 down beneath the 10th stone. So we said, all right, this is the X marks the spot. It's got to be here. And so he starts sticking the prodding pole in, and he's doing it. And it's amazing that they let us dig, because there's shrubs in there. Part of what was a little unfair, I mean, they mentioned the couplet in the verse, and pictures that we've subsequently seen shown that there were 2 couplets or urns on each side of the wall. They had been removed when we were there. So that would have been another identifier for us to make it even further obvious, but they weren't there over time. So he's digging down, and yeah, we didn't know if it was 2 feet, 3 feet. The planter itself probably went about 4, maybe 4 feet. It's not just dirt. He's displacing shrubs. The horticulture guy is allowing it. I can't believe it. We're digging down. He's hitting root after root of these huge trees that were growing from the sides. So we had to chip away at the roots. So it took.
That's why it took so long. I mean, there were just roots and rocks and everything in there.
You don't have to tell me about that.
Right. We're preaching to the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, but I mean, he every time you hit the roots, you convince yourself that's a different feel. Like that's something else.
Yeah, for sure.
And I have to give Andy credit. Kept volunteering to dig, but I wanted to find this thing. So I did not let Andy dig for 5 hours.
Remember the Bugs Bunny cartoon when the genie shrinks down Daffy Duck and he winds up in that little clam with the pearl? He goes, mine, it's all mine. Like that, Brian was a miniature Daffy Duck, and he was just digging and digging, and I wanted to capture it. And the lower we went, he'd stop and he'd go, I don't understand. It's not supposed to be more than 2 feet or 3 feet. How can this be?
I just kept saying to myself,
it all adds up.
It's gotta be here. It's gotta be here. We've solved every clue. We have solved it all.
Yeah, and the part that was really driving us crazy or made us fearful is if it's not here, then maybe it just doesn't exist. Maybe the Chicago thing was a hoax to sell the book.
Oh, that's a good point. At the time, nobody knew. There were rumors that the people in Chicago had found it, but nobody ever saw a newspaper article or anything at that point.
Well, that's what Matt had said on the last episode, is that there were rumors that something was found in Chicago, but it wasn't like it is today where you find out about it the next day. It's kind of a urban legend, so to speak. So you guys weren't even sure whether that this was a legitimate thing at the time or not.
No, this was a huge leap of faith.
Yeah, that's the only way you can describe it. But having made the leap, having driven the distance, having found what we thought was pretty much the X marks the spot, we were prepared to dig, or I was prepared to watch him dig through the base of this thing and come out the other side, right? So we figured you're either going to hit the bottom or you're going to find it at some point. But if it wasn't there, then I, in my mind, thought, but maybe he really didn't bury the treasures. Maybe it's just something that was supposed to get you kind of pumped up, because there was no other place it could possibly be. So after 5 hours, he climbs out of the box. All of the dirt had been displaced to the side. The guy who runs the garden says, don't worry about it. We'll put it back for you. He has to now hoist himself out of like this. It was like a coffin, like dead man walking. He sits down on the front steps.
The whole 5 hours, the news guy was asking us questions and interviewing us the whole time.
While you're digging the hole?
The whole time.
Absolutely. He was there for the whole thing.
So in one ear you have the news guy, yeah, so what do you do for a living? And asking you all these questions. Then in the other ear you have, dearly beloved, we're gathered here today to join this man and woman. What a strange scene it must have been.
There were people from the wedding, I remember in white tuxes or something, who came around the back of the wall while Brian was 3 feet down in the hole, and they're like, "What's he doing?" So, hey, what are you guys doing? And we're digging for treasure. Come here, look at this. Come here. So the guests
of
from
course.
the wedding were coming around to see. Ultimately, though, like if it was one of those fast action, things, like the wedding disappears, the chairs are pulled away. The newspaper guy who was talking to us all the time started to lose his enthusiasm, and Marvin, the photographer, is sent away. We reach a point that it's not going to be found, and we hit literally rock bottom.
It's been all these hours. Everybody's pretty much on the verge of giving up. Some people have given up. Brian crawls out of the Roman tub, the big, stone planter box. And what happens for everybody who's just new to this? And tell me what happens. How does Andy end up inside the hole with a shovel?
I just grab a soda at that point, and I sit down on the steps exhausted, just absolutely exhausted. I know that our time is almost up, and Andy takes the probe and walks to the other side of the box.
It was about 4:30. We knew we had about a half hour left, so this was kind of time to say our goodbyes. But you were just tired. You were totally defeated. He was so upset, and I felt so bad for him, because this was the culmination of all these years of work. So I'm standing there, and he happens to sit at the bottom of the steps now. So I turn to look at him, and I'm looking at the roadway as it curves, and we had gone over the verse 10,000 times over the 9 hours that we were driving, every possible meaning, and I'm seeing it curve, and I know the Italian guy. So I said at one point, Brian, if you are facing this direction, different perspective, and you're looking at the first line beneath, 2 countries as the road curves, you would actually, if you counted it now, same way, stones from right to left, it would take you to just the other, still within the box. As I climbed up on the box, I realized, you're still in the box. And I said, we counted the same 10 stones down, but it put us on the exact opposite side of the flower box. So I said it would put you here. And he's drinking his Pepsi, and he is so bummed. And he takes the metal prod that we got at Home Depot, and he goes, here, knock your socks off. And he kind of tosses it at me like annoyed. And so I take it and I drive into the ground once, and I tell the story to my friends because it still blows my mind, like the old, and I think I told you this once, John, like the old Tootsie Pop commercial. How many licks does it take to get the center? It was like a 1, 2, and that third one, literally, there was a different feeling. I had prodded. He dug, but I prodded. I knew it wasn't a root, and I knew it wasn't a rock. So I did it again, and there was a scratching sound, and I get these chills, like goosebumps. Again, we're as down as you can be, so now I'm starting to come up and start moving the dirt away with the hands, I said, and I come across this big shard of plexiglass.
Okay.
And it doesn't belong there. We had seen garbage. We had seen things like that, but nothing like this. So I look at Brian. I said, Brian, he said, what? I said, I just found a huge piece of plexiglass. And he goes, yeah. And I took it and I winged it at him. I could have cut him through his jugular.
Oh, he thought you were messing with him.
Yeah, I said to him, plexiglass is I go, plexiglass is translucent, man. And I throw it at him. And as the last syllable's coming out of my mouth, he is in the dirt, digging with his hands like a golden retriever trying to dig out his favorite bone.
Mine, all mine.
Yeah, well, he's back. I mean, all of a sudden, like, that's the thing, the emotion, the breadth of depth of emotion from as high as we were to as low as we went. And in that instant right back that the possibility existed, maybe it was there. And within maybe 10, 15 minutes, we have the top shoveled off. And we know, and now the newspaper reporter goes, holy shit, oh my God. He calls Marvin, get back here. The guy who's the horticulture guy is going, oh my God, what is that? So we know it's not some bag of roots, and he works it, and slowly but surely, we unearth this thing. He pulls it out of the ground, and it's this large, probably basketball-sized plexiglass, sturdy plexiglass box, and inside is the remnants of the cask, because over time, I guess it had caved in and it was filled with dirt, but we knew.
You guys said that it was pretty caked in there, like it had been destroyed previous to you guys even arriving, and probably been pushed in there and been filled with mud for a while, right?
Yeah, it may have been that when they planted shrubs in, because remember, there were shrubs in that box. So at some point, somebody dug and nobody hit it because it was 2.5, 3 feet down. Nobody hit. So they may have done it, but it was clear because at first I thought, oh God, I poked it with the prodding thing and I broke it. But that mud had been caked on for years and years. So now he's got it, and it was so fragile. We go back over to the Italian garden in the fountain that had been this thing for him for 23 years, and he washed it piece by piece. He took out his toothbrush and started scraping away the dirt till we could uncover. And man, I got to tell you, it was ridiculous.
It was surreal. It was like, I can't believe that we actually found this.
Did you have a cell phone at the time? Were cell phones around?
Yes. Yeah, I did.
All right, so you were able to call.
But you know what, John? It was like, I want to say it was like the Palm Pilots, because even when we videoed it, it was on a handheld, one of those big cameras you put like on your shoulder.
Sure.
It wasn't, it wasn't like we had our smartphones and you could video the stuff. So we didn't call anybody. You didn't call. I don't remember. I didn't call home. We just knew it was like an episode of 24 and we were in the last hour. And we were like Jack Bauer and Chloe, and we had solved it. But now the electricity, the newspaper guy, because he's been writing all day, it was the happy ending. Like 1 hour early, there was no happy ending. So he's cleaned it off. We're staring at it. And just as we have it laid out, we're like, okay, we got to go. And they're like, what? And he said, we got to go. It's 6 o'clock and we got to leave now. We're not going to make it for Mother's Day. So we pack up our stuff. We hug our friends and we say goodbye. And the two of us are still just like, what just happened? So we drove in silence for quite a long time.
For most of the 9 hours back, Andy was asleep. And I drove just on adrenaline, and it was actually a horrible, horrible rain and thunderstorm. But I kept trying to wake Andy up to talk about it.
It's funny. I don't remember that, but I trust you. But it was I was definitely emotionally spent. I can't remember ever doing anything again, the high was so high and the low was so low in such a compact period of time. So I do remember stopping, and I had said this before, but we stopped at like a Bob Evans or something, rest stop.
Yeah.
We had to eat. Yeah, I'm sitting there with him, and Brian, very chatty tonight, but not always the most reactive guy. And I'm like, what are you feeling? Like, what are you thinking? And now I'm interviewing him. I said, I don't understand. This is 23 years in the making. What's going through your head? And we're eating, and he looks at me and he goes, I got to tell you, next to the birth of my kids, this is the greatest moment of my entire life. And I got complete goosebumps because I got it. Like, my portion of this was so truncated in time, it was packed into about a year. And then it was super packed into those last couple months and weeks. But he had been living this 23 years, thought it was confident in Philadelphia. And here we were, thousands of miles away, and we hit the spot. So it was an amazing thing. But now we have it.
Was it the first dig that you ever went and did on this?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know if anyone dug anything up to that point. from the Quest for Treasure boards. I'm not even sure.
Is there anything that you wanted to ask, or was there any internet questions for Brian and Andy about the actual find itself, the dig, George?
No, there weren't any about the dig. The only thing that I take from this, and I take the same thing from Chicago, and it seems to be a problem now with people who are currently working on these puzzles, is that the visual clues in the paintings are obvious. And they're not obvious, like, they may not be obvious until you get there. But when you get to the site, they're obvious. There's nothing else those columns could be. There's nothing else that planter could be. There's nothing else that fountain could be. In these, to solve them, you don't have to, like, you don't have to zoom in on an image and count dots. Things don't kind of look like something else. They look exactly like.
That's a good point. You guys, when you were doing your image comparisons, and I know we'll post this photo that I made along with the other photos we have up on our Facebook page. But I did a photo where we took all of the things that were found in the Cleveland image, and we superimposed the real images over the actual painting. And we'll post that up there. But there wasn't anything in that image that you had to, like, use a microscope to see or strain your eyes. It was all pretty straightforward, sizable images that you were finding, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. John Jude Palancar is an amazing artist, and he has figured out ways to just blend things into the paintings, and you really don't know what it is that you need to see until you're there, or until you see it on the internet, I guess.
Now I think about it, I remember the thing that hooked me before he even showed me the wall when that was discovered, because that was Clint. That got me in a car driving 9 hours. But I remember when he showed me the Cleveland Terminal Tower, the silhouette, and I remember when he showed in the trees, and I remember when he showed me the state of Ohio. It brought me right back to Highlights magazine when I was a kid.
Yep.
Just to find the images in the picture, and we all played it. We all, I'm 51, but like I remember how much you'd go to that page, and that was the thing you wanted to circle before your brother and sister got to find them. So when I saw that combination of puzzle and imagery, and then the other stuff, and then as he first explained it to me, didn't know which verse went with that. It was so brilliant. It wasn't that one went with one, two went with two. So to have to put that together, the fact that there were those identifiers that were a little tricky, but then when you got to the site, very large, dead-on confirmers that this is where it is. There's no question. It's almost like if you bothered to get all the way there, he was rewarding you by saying, look at the picture. You'll know when you're close when you see these 2 or 3 things.
Yeah, it seems like the whole thing works like that in some respects, because when we're saying it's hidden in plain sight, or, when you see it, you know what it is, it's not an optical illusion. It's not a blur that you just happen to catch at the right light. It's something that he's blended into another object to make it look like something else. But when you actually see it, you see, oh, that's a tree, or that's a box, or that's a windowsill, or whatever it is that you see. Once you see it, you see it. The whole puzzle kind of works like that. For example, in St. Augustine, the first chapter written in water, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense until you're standing in front of what he meant for you to see when you're reading that. So the whole puzzle, and I think what George was getting at was that there was nothing that was ever questionable where you said, well, this kind of looks like this. I mean, the tiles in image 4 are definitely the tiles that you see at the cultural gardens. The pillars are definitely the pillars. The wall's definitely the wall. The fountain is definitely the fountain. It's nothing you have to strain to see, right?
Don't forget the Centaur's Cup. That's also there were so many aha moments when you get there. And also back then, there were a few things that we had just barely figured out. I believe we had just figured out, I think it was Fox, who figured out that there are latitudes and longitudes hidden in the pictures. And I think that we had figured that out about only a month before we went to Cleveland. So it was like an additional confirmer for Cleveland.
Well, George, I do personally believe there's a deeper puzzle going on, and I'm sure if Matt were able to join us tonight, he was unable to join us, but if he were here, we'd be discussing the path and how that works. But it just goes to prove once again George's point that you really don't need to understand fully how the puzzle works to actually find a cask. And I guess that's one of the flaws going on. You guys didn't have any conception that there was a starting point and you go from here to here or any of that stuff, because you barely knew about the Chicago find, so there was really no model on how to do these, correct?
Right. For us. It was written. It was written in the verse, "Seek the columns for the surge." Once he had the information about the wall, and once you stand there and see it, what amazes me to this day, 13 years later, is even standing at the columns, looking at the wall, it can be anywhere. Even if you get to the right side of the wall, flipping a coin, it can be anywhere. If you get to the flower box, have we not poked the poker in that spot or poked it 2 inches to the right, and I go all the way down, I go, that's stupid. Come on, at 6 o'clock, let's go. So the way I looked at it, and I know you guys have done a ton of work on plotting out deeper meanings and methods to that probably link together a lot of these. There's a latitude and longitude. There are images that go from larger to smaller that get you from state to city to place, and then there are confirmers of that place. But I believe that coupled with the words that take you to the spot, there are at least 1 or 2 confirmers that are so absolute that give you that I'm within a few feet and I have to dig here. Like when you said
Right.
the part about St. Augustine, right? Unless you were standing there or had vacation there, you would not know that the book starts with written in water. And my favorite, and I'm sure you'll cover it in another episode, but my favorite one to this day is the North Carolina by Dauntless and Unconquerable Determination. Like when I see that, and again, when you cover it, you'll cover it, but to stand at the base of a statue and see words written on a statue and know, he looked up, he was thinking, I need something here. Oh, that's a cool quote by Dauntless and Unconquerable Determination. And unless you had been to Kill Devil Hill, and unless you had seen that on the wing statue, you wouldn't know that it's there. But once you've seen it, your heart beats 10 times faster every second because you know that's a place where he stood. So definitely pad in hand, which he confirmed for us when we met him. He basically took notes on his whereabouts, and when he decided where he wanted to dig, he took notes, and then he would create the verse around what he had seen in the pictures he took.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the if you can call an ongoing theme in this, that's definitely one of them, is that the riddles sometimes are clever, and you will know them when you see them, undoubtedly. I mean, it's like they just jump out at you when you're standing there and you're at the right spot and you're reading the thing the right way and interpreting it the right way. So I agree, it's full of that. So, okay, they find the cask, and let's set it up. Now you have to contact Byron Price. So I assume, did you call him or?
The newspaper guy talked to Byron Price because he interviewed him for the article. And basically Byron Price says that, he hasn't been to the vault. The jewels are in a vault. He hasn't been there in a long, long time, and he needs to find the key. I think that made the Cleveland article as well. So I just waited to hear from him. A month goes by, 2 months, 3 months. So finally I send him an email saying, we'd like to come out and see it. And he says he can't find the key to the vault. I check in with him every now and then. I don't know how long it was. It was several months, wasn't it, Andy?
It was either July or August. I could double check, but it was certainly a couple months because we got a little fidgety and antsy. Like, why? I mean, this whole idea that there was a vault somewhere, it was so perfect. It wasn't even that it was a safety deposit box. He couldn't find the key to the vault, like the crypt keeper. And we're like, what are you talking about? We just went to Cleveland and dug this out. You got to be able to find the jewel. So, and he was kind of cool about the whole thing. Like, it wasn't a big deal. So when Brian, you set it up with him, he finally found the day, and we went into New York together.
Right. We picked the day and we drove into New York. And along the way, we're thinking, we've never met him. What is it going to be like? We were like joking to ourselves, maybe this is going to be like a scene out of Willy Wonka where, he's got half a hat on and half a clock and all that kind of stuff. And the funny thing is, when we get to his office, we go up into the elevator and we walk out of the elevator and we're in a room that is coated with like aluminum foil.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
walls, the ceilings, everything. And we looked at each other. He goes, and we say, "Wow, we really are in Willy Wonka's factory."
Yeah, it was like a space. It was like a space chamber. It was so weird in the middle of this New York building, skyscraper. We walk in, and you're right. It was all silver, like covered in aluminum foil, and we didn't know where the entry door, the exit door. It was like a final. It was like a final test or rite of passage. You had to figure your way in and out if you were going to meet him. Right? You remember that? It was so
Yeah,
weird.
absolutely. We, I guess we get to the door. We somehow get out of that room. We get into his main office area. It's not his office. It's like his whole office building. And there are just books everywhere. Thousands and thousands of books everywhere. And it's a very busy office. Receptionist brings us over to Byron Price. He comes out of his office. I had brought the cask. We each brought our books with us. He loved seeing the cast. He ended up autographing our books at some point, but he started reminiscing about things. And were you in the car, Andy, or was it just me?
No,
We were in the car too. And so we got into his little convertible car, and we drove to this vault, this bank, and we got into the bank, and I guess he hadn't been there in a long time, so we were like waiting in the bank for like 20 minutes. We had no idea what he was doing. He was talking to the teller. So eventually he got permission to go, and he takes us down into the basement in the vault with him, with his key to the box. And before he opens the box, he's talking to us, and he's basically saying, the solutions are in the boxes in the vault as well. He asked me what gemstone it is, and I told him it's the aquamarine, because he didn't really even remember that. He's more like an absent-minded professor kind of guy. That's how I think of him. And but he's very funny. He ended up taking a picture of us, like a selfie, and sending it to his wife. He was dating his wife at the time that he buried the treasures. So, this was 20 years ago. We stand about 15 feet away from him while he takes the box behind a screen, and we hear rustling through it, and it's pretty dark in there. He says, "Oh, the solutions, they're not here." And he keeps looking some more, and he says, "Oh, I forgot about these." And it turns out that he had, I think it was 25,000, right, Andy?
$25,000 savings bonds.
$25,000 in savings bonds that he had left there for 20 years. So it was probably a lot more than that.
Wow.
And he didn't even buy us lunch.
No, I mean, he's going through the box. You got a picture, like you said, the office it's not like a hoarder, but there's books everywhere. There is this quirky feel to the guy, but he was definitely.
Well, he was a publisher, right? He runs a publishing company, and you guys were attorneys.
Yeah,
right.
Well, he probably figured you guys could pay for your own lunch.
No. But I remember, as he's rifling through, we're both kind of looking at each other like there was an air of excitement about him, because he said, we didn't know if he was going to give it to us and leave. He got very chatty, and we're thinking, let's hang with him. Let's have lunch. Maybe he'll tell us something that we can use for another dig site. We'll ask him some questions, and he was pretty free with information when we wound up going to lunch. But yeah, as Brian said before that, he's digging through the box. Oh, here's the ruby, or and that's not it.
Well, he says, here's the blue jewel. And he comes out and he hands it to me, and it's dark in there. It turns out he gave me the wrong jewel. He gave me the sapphire instead of the aquamarine. The aquamarine is my birthstone, and I had only been looking 22 years for it, and so I still don't have it.
When I find the one in St. Augustine, I'll trade you.
Exactly, trade.
I'll do that.
Yeah.
It's a very, very elite group of trading, but people who have found gems from Byron Price's The Secret. All right. 3 users.
So there's one question, since you guys were talking about him being kind of absent-minded. The biggest question that I've gotten so far is, somewhere in the forums, Brian, you said that he mentioned the 10 by 13 was feet instead of trees.
Yes, I remembered I tried to remember everything he said that day because I truly wanted to help everyone on the boards. So, that's why we had lunch with him and we hung out and all that. And so I was just I couldn't write it down. That would be rude and he would stop talking. So I basically just had to try and remember everything he said. And I distinctly remember him going through the book, talking about, he was like flipping through the pages while we were waiting for his car or something. I got him talking about Chicago. And he said, yeah, M&B, that stood for Mozart and Beethoven, and 10 by 13, that was feet. He did say that. And he told me the story about two young stockbrokers, and there was a concrete slab and some construction going on, and he told me all this, that they couldn't get to the cask, so they sent him a picture of the slab, and he said to them, well, when the slab is removed, then the jewel is yours. And this is what he told me. And, it was 22 years ago that he's remembering this from. So, and he couldn't even remember that the solutions weren't there. He couldn't remember that he had lost $25,000 in savings bonds. So maybe he got some of these things wrong as well. And I think he did. But I can tell you that is what he told me.
It was a long time, and he had done a lot in his life and his career since the time of burying these things. That there's probably a good chance that he did forget some things. Some people would say, look, when you do something as magnanimous as this, you don't forget about it. But, maybe you do lose track of some of the details.
Well, I think if this was the only book he ever did, and if he was like famous for this, he'd remember every detail. But he puts out like a book a week.
Right, yeah.
And he's into making money selling the books. Maybe he really loved the idea of doing this, but it was just a book to him, just a way to try and make money. Because he even mentioned that he thought that everyone would dig up all of these things right away and that the publisher would kill him. That's what he thought.
Now, I know everybody listening would kill me if I didn't ask. Is there anything that he told you that would help the current searchers?
We actually have the solutions. So
But if you could just mail those to me, that would be nice.
I put everything on the Quest for Treasure bulletin boards in detail. Now you're asking me to remember everything from 14 years ago. If you go to the Quest for Treasure bulletin board and you look at the thread called Cleveland, you will see I wrote down pretty much everything that he told me.
And we'll link that somewhere. Make it easier to find.
I remember after we came back, I had read through every entry, everything that was on, but I had never gone on. I was sort of a silent partner, but after we found it, it was so exciting. I know Brian used to use the icon for, what was it, Brian? Calvin, from Calvin and Hobbes. So I started using the icon for Hobbes, like his imaginary friend, and he was Egbert, so I became Siskel, and so a partnership, and started commenting on things. We definitely put down everything we saw, took in, smelled, felt. We put in there with the hope that it would help somebody else solve something else, because we had our moment. And even then, the Cleveland Plain Dealer then came out with like a 10-page weekend insert article where the author, he basically transposed what was happening in real time, and you got the feel. It's an excellent article.
Christopher Evans, we'll put a link to that article up as well.
It was great, but I would say this though, and you guys say, well, I don't know if you'd remember, it's 20 some years ago. I don't know that I totally agree with that, because he didn't go in connection with his other books to different places and dig and get on planes and dig and then have to write these these complex verses to go with his friends' paintings. I mean, I think this was far different than whether it was fantasy, type stuff or not. It was very different than anything else he wound up doing and went into iPublishing later. And you remember where you went. I don't care. I remember where I was, 24 years ago when it's significant. He asked us when we were at lunch, what did we see? What was the solve? And we showed him, a number of the clues. I didn't get the feel then that, he never said to us, did you ever consider this part? Or there's also this, or I'm surprised you solved it because you never figured out this part of it. We showed him all the identifiers. We got him to sort of like what we're telling you guys. And he looked at us and said, you got it.
There's some theories about why he would be apprehensive about wanting to continue his enthusiasm for the puzzle to be solved. After 20-some years, I mean, these are just some arguments. I'm not saying they're my opinions, but there's some arguments that I've heard that after 20 years, it's not of his benefit to continue the hunt, to give clues. The only thing that is going to come from him perpetuating it is he's going to have to get gems and meet with people and give out the prizes. It seemed like he was not in any kind of way looking to put out a second book after 20-some years. Maybe he had just forgotten some of the things. Maybe he didn't. It probably didn't behoove him to want to continue to get everybody else to solve it. So, we feel that there was maybe a process of vetting someone when you went to tell him that what you thought were the answers to some of the riddles and where you thought it was. If you were completely off base, he might go as far as to say, well, there's not even a treasure in St. Augustine. But if you were on to something, maybe he would help you out then. Didn't seem like after 20 years that he wanted to perpetuate something that was just going to continue to take up his time and he'd receive nothing from it. There's been that argument has been made about it as well.
I'm going to tell you this, and Brian, you may feel differently, but I'm going to tell you this. One of the, besides being one of the few that found one, okay, we were definitely one of the few who ever got to sit with him and talk to him face to face. And people can argue and dissect and try to figure things out as much as they want, but this was just a guy who grew up in, Brooklyn, New York, had a family, did this thing when he was younger. When we sat with him that day, he was psyched that we were there. I do remember very well the selfie that he took. He said, would you guys mind if I take this? I have to show it to my wife. Like, there was a youthful exuberance that came out that, after all this time, wasn't that this was his legacy, his great achievement in life, but that he had done this and then finally came back. I never got the feeling that this was now going to be a huge annoyance factor. He was going to deal with it. I thought he was kind of tickled that.
So you think he was just as enamored that you guys at your age had dug one up?
Without question, as I sat there, I could feel his enthusiasm for the fact that we had tracked him down. I don't know that he felt like we were weird guys who for 23 years had given up families and lives to do this. When he met us, he saw we were just two regular guys, two lawyers, and this was a journey that Brian had been on. I joined him, and he was, Brian, you're right. He smiled. He was I never felt like in that hour and a half, 2 hours that we sat there at lunch that he got annoyed being there. He was talking freely, not about solutions, but generalities of what he did. I mean, if we had to do it all over again right now, my God, the questions I would ask him, he wouldn't have answered any of them. But so he was a little bit, he wanted to get, it goes right back, John, to the very first question Brian asked him on the phone. And when he said, as far as I'm concerned, the game is still on. Even in that moment sitting with him, the game was still on. Was he gonna benefit financially? No, he was going to sell any more books. I bought my book on eBay for $3, back then. So, it was more that here he was 23 years older than when he buried them here. And we're finding this thing, and he enjoyed it. I enjoyed the lunch we had with him. It would never struck me as a nuisance. We left there on a real high, not just because we turned it in and Brian got the jewel, but because the author I remember feeling he was very tickled by the fact that we had spent the time and that we had actually found it. So I don't think if people came along, he would have been annoyed.
Yeah, you could tell when he was telling us about, especially when he touched the cask and saw it for the first time.
Definitely.
In a long time.
Definitely.
You could tell there was the guy who would jump fences to dig holes and write things down. And he said that he would, this is something I may not have actually posted. He said that he would take the photographs and whatever he wanted to put in the photos and all the clues, and he would put it in a big envelope and send it to John Jude Palancar. But he had like this rubber stamp or something that said The Secret on it. and he would stamp the back of the envelope with it.
Oh, nice. You know, it's good that there was that kind of camaraderie back then this is 13, 14 years ago, and now there's still a lot of interest going on, but the camaraderie isn't like what it used to be on the message boards, and hopefully we can get to an atmosphere where it is back to that same kind of work ethic that everybody had back then of trying to combine efforts to figure things out. And a lot has been figured out since then. We've gone back and dissected Cleveland. We've dissected Chicago, found a bunch of things that were missed. We've proposed a deeper meaning to things going on, but, you know, like for the most part, the guys in Chicago, they didn't solve every clue. They found a cask. You guys didn't get every clue, but you got enough of the big ones to get you in the right spot to dig a hole to find a cask. If it's that easy, what happened on Expedition Unknown? Where's the cask, man? Let's get into that a little bit. So, I mean, we first heard on our little group that you guys were going to be doing this well ahead of time, and it was pretty exciting. And we got to hear some of the details about how it went down, but we all had to wait like everybody else to watch the episode and see what happened. You know, why don't you get into it a little bit about how that all transpired? I know that they contacted you and they said, hey, you know, why don't you come on the show? We're going to go do this. And then before you knew it, Andy was in Cleveland again, talking with the crew, right?
I knew of the show. I didn't know much about it, but they had come up with this idea, and the producer had run across, I guess, the article from Cleveland and was aware of the book. So she called Brian, and then Brian called me. So you got to talk to this lady. They want to do an episode on The Secret. And going back to when we left Bob Evans' restaurant, I remember driving home and we were talking to each other going, you know, when they make this into a movie someday, who's going to play you? Who's going to play me? And we were laughing about it 14 years ago. So now the idea that they were going to do a TV show was hysterical, that we were going to get to revisit it. We wound up, I know they came to New York and met me, and I showed them a bunch of things about New York because after Cleveland, Brian and I had scattered around New York quite a bit. I remember going to Ellis Island with him way back when and done some work there. So we were just I was trying to get them in the mood and show them some things, but also show them how incredibly expansive and difficult New York was.
Now, did you give him any information? I noticed that Josh proposed his own kind of little solve for New York, or at least a partial solve to what he thought the verse was talking about. Did you feed any of that into him, or was that his original idea, or do you know?
I spent time with the film crew, or not the film crew, the producer and a couple other people in Battery Park, and I was pointing out certain things.
One part of this Expedition Unknown that Andy may not really be that familiar with was when they first contacted me, they had no idea, you know, where they were going to search or anything. And they asked me, because I was involved with the Cleveland find, they asked me, where is the closest? Where are you the closest out of all the sites? And I know I had been to St. Augustine about 3 times, so I had suggested St. Augustine. I said, but, you know, it's going to be tough getting permission to dig there. And I had a friend who lives in St. Augustine, Al Maciag, and he was invaluable, boots on the ground, actually getting permission from the people in St. Augustine, were helping to get the permission there. And he met with the producers in the historic library there, showed them the pictures, all sorts of things. He ended up not getting on the show because they wanted me and Andy to be the ones searching for it.
Right.
But I want to give a shout out to Al Maciag because he was invaluable. He's been researching this for about 3 or 4 years now himself. He just doesn't post on the boards.
The owner of the Fountain of Youth, he was reluctant. I mean, he's reluctant to let anybody look there. I know George has had some difficulties searching around with a GPR, but you have a relationship with him. What are his thoughts? Has he discussed anything about the widespread popularity that a national TV show could bring to the hunt and what it might do?
He thinks it's just going to bring more people digging at night.
I have a mutual friend with the owner as well, and I've talked to him a good bit, and he's just sick of people digging in the Fountain of Youth.
Right.
If you get caught digging in the Fountain of Youth, that's it. You will be prosecuted. Like, he's at that point now.
But I would say this, he was really cool that day. And yeah, he knew that the exposure was going to bring all kinds of folks. I'll just tell you a quick funny aside. I told this to Brian yesterday. I was in court yesterday. I got a phone call. I came out of court. It was a woman from Washington. And I said, who is this? I looked you up. I solved St. Augustine. I said, what? She said, yeah. I said, who are you? She said, oh, I saw you on Expedition Unknown. I just wanted to call you. It was sort of like, it was a little bit like Stephen King's Misery. I'm like, who are, so she said, I said, well, have you been looking for a long time? She goes, no, I saw the show. So I went online. I spent about 5 minutes on it. And I'm thinking, odds are she's really crazy, but what if she's just a savant and she actually did? So she's telling me, but
she must have spent more time trying to find you and how to contact you
to find the treasure. But the solve that she told me, she said, well, if you look at the sign that's buried in, or whatever, in water, and as you walk in, there's a conquistador right there. I said, right. And she said, well, he's wearing silver plating, and it mentions silver. She says, I think it's buried right behind him. So I start to realize she doesn't really know, but she's so into it. Like, she's really into it, which was kind of cute. And she said, and this is my favorite part, she said, well, the verse talks of shell, limestone, salt. And so she's trying to tell me, well, it's Florida, so there's shells everywhere. She goes, and salt because there's a refreshment stand right behind him, and I'm sure there's a thing of salt on the counter. So I start laughing because I'm thinking she thinks she's got the perfect solve. So yes, it's bringing out a lot of people. Some of them are just, hopeful. But to get to your point about the owner, I truly believe that especially in the group that you've put together, because I always think about the fact, God, I would love, John, if you found Milwaukee, if George found St. Augustine, like, you want to spread the wealth of the excitement of the feeling of unearthing it. It was second to none. And you guys have worked so hard and are so smart about so much of it that you deserve that feeling. So I feel like, because of this small group, or this, the knowledge of certain people, if George, for example, you went back and you had a real solve, something that was legitimate, and you're not just some guy coming from California who saw the episode on TV, and you showed him the clues, I believe he would be excited enough to accompany you and say, well, let's take a look and see what we can find. I don't think he wants 1,000 people coming and digging, but I think if it's a well thought out potential solve.
That's true.
I have no doubt, for example, that if I called him tomorrow and said, hey, John, we're going to be down at St. Augustine, something unbelievable came up. I want to show you these pictures, see what you think, because he's also a wealth of knowledge. As we walked around with him, he's going, oh, that wasn't there. And the fountain with the kid that was there, was moved in 1994. So he knows everything. And he got sucked in. And if you're just somebody off the beaten path who wants to dig, I agree. He'll have you arrested. But if you're George, who's been to St. Augustine, who knows John, or you've put your time and your dues in, and your theories are legit, I think he would welcome those types of endeavors, because I think he would like to find the solve if it didn't mean digging up the entire park.
He would definitely like to have it solved, especially because it would stop people solving. He does have requirements. Like, you can dig. There's a historical director that you have to go through, and his requirements are you have to have insurance, number one, and you have to have a damn good solve. Like, he has to look at it and be like, yeah, okay, that's plausible. And if you email him with those things, he'll come back to you and he'll be like, yeah, I'll accompany you on a dig. You can dig a very, very small area, exactly where you think it is.
And he'll accompany. I mean, even when we were down there and Brian was walking through a lot of the clues and the observatory and the windrows and the small men and that. There's this diorama that's been there since 1960 with these little guys, George, you've been there, and in front of the windrows, near men with windrows. And you sit there and he goes, oh, that's been there since the 60s. And so that was there, and you're close in the observatory. So we felt pretty good about that spot. And just to give you this part of it, like when we went back and forth and got the hit with the GPR, there were electrical lines, gas lines. It sure seemed like, it could have been excavated by mistake.
Those things are useless, those GPRs. Let me tell you.
They are. But as many times as like we had to shoot one scene again or again, we hit that spot and they started digging it out and they saw that clear, smooth surface that looked like It looked like it was see-through and you would see the dirt, and my heart jumped out of my chest. Brian, you did too. Like, we were dying because I'm thinking, holy shit, like that's it. Part of me was like, I'm not worthy of this moment. Guys like George spent, John, you spent, like, I was glad Brian was there. I know he spent a ton of time there, but I thought, all right, Josh is promoting it, the host, and we thought we had it. And when he started to unearth it, and it came out that black tile.
Yeah, it's sewer pipe.
That reaction was so dead on. They didn't say shoot it again, give us another reaction. We died because I remember saying, who knew we were digging in Ponce de Leon's formal bathroom, master bathroom? Like, there was no reason that this black smooth tile would be 2.5 feet down as opposed to a beer can or something, you know? So that was crushing. But I will tell you guys this as well, and I don't know if this didn't get shared at all, but even after we spent 10 hours there, we wound up going way out to the point. Remember, Brian, that white rock?
It's by an anchor. And then there's another monument that they showed you digging at, I think in the credits.
Yes, but we wound up spending some time there. We thought we didn't have it, and we got to that point, and that's the area that you're standing by the water. If you look out, there's like this man-made pole in the distance, a huge crucifix, I think, and it kind of looked like the palm tree that's not really a palm tree. And if you stand at a certain angle, that white rock looked like that Rock of Gibraltar or glacier thing that's in the water that we couldn't figure out. And we're looking at it, and it says by the tall tree. And now John, the owner of the Found Youth, says something about this is the memorial for Pine. It was for Captain Pine. And he goes, Pine is a tall tree. He goes, holy shit. So now all of a sudden we go, wait a second. This marker matches that white stone. If you stand here, that crucifix looks like the bark of the tree that's making up the palm tree that has no reflection in the water. So we start digging around that. And again, wasn't there, but just shows you, right down the way from those obelisks. So it's, God, man, it's there. And it's maddening to not be able to narrow it down. You guys have done so much work on it. And I believe that at some point you're going to figure out one missing piece that takes you to that spot. And I think when you do, and you contact John, he's going to say, yeah, come on down and let's find it. And George, I agree with you. He'll be thrilled that people will stop. But for the moment, he'll be more thrilled to hold the cask in his hands when you pull it out, because you become a child. You're a 10-year-old child digging up buried treasure, and it's super cool.
Yeah, just for anybody that's going to dig in St. Augustine, if you want a piece of Expedition Unknown history, that sewer pipe is everywhere right outside the gate. Just everywhere you dig, you will hit that sewer pipe. You will pull up just bags of it. And for the creepy stalker lady, that Ponce de Leon statue's only been there like 10 years.
By the way, I just want to point out, I've also been contacted by many people saying, they've solved things in 5 minutes, and they know that it's in Dallas, or they know that it's in Salt Lake City or St. Louis. And I think we should let them go with it. And because the journey is more fun than the destination,
Right.
It's a big part of it.
I totally agree.
Especially if you have kids or something like that. If you think that it's in Salt Lake City and you have these clues, take your kids and go on a treasure hunt. I mean, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, we've had since the Expedition Unknown episode, we've had an influx of new users. It's crazy. And they have all these ideas that are just outlandish ideas that couldn't possibly be true. But it's important that we kind of nurture that, because you never know what they're going to find. These puzzles aren't solved. We don't know the answer. So
right. If somebody thinks it's in Dallas, a woman actually was like trying to convince me that it was in Dallas, and I wouldn't say no.
Right.
He said, if you think it's in Dallas, these are plausible theories. Do you have any kids? I think she had 2 daughters. I said, go on a little vacation. Go for it.
I remember about 5 years back, maybe 6 years back, we vacationed in the Outer Banks, and I have my 6, 7, 8, she'll be 18 next week. My daughter was 12, and my nephew was also 12. And we had done some work on North Carolina, but it didn't beat being there. And so I said, hey, you guys want to spend a day on a treasure hunt? And to this day, I mean, other than the one I did with Brian, it was one of the most enjoyable days of my entire life. We started at the wing. I showed them the clues. We worked our way across the Bound Bridge. We got to Roanoke. We did the whole thing. And it was such a thrill as a dad with your kids. We didn't even bring digging tools that day. We just did the journey, like Brian said. So good, clean family fun. Great. Are there guys who are more involved scientifically in trying to solve it? Sure, it takes all kinds. But that one person who happened to see something, an image that the four of us don't know, but way back then, stood on that ground and saw it and goes, that reminds me of the such and such obelisk statue. And you go, whoa, because sometimes you just got to get lucky. And maybe there's going to be somebody in this new batch who sees one of the identifiers and is familiar with that and would never know unless you happen to be at that spot. And maybe that'll unlock a clue. It does. Whenever Brian said to me he needed a fresh pair of eyes. And sometimes for all the nutty things you sift through, every now and then there's a good one.
Back in 1982, when I bought the book and I was going down because I thought it was in Philadelphia and taking the trolley down to the site every week or so, I had a ball. It was a lot of fun. And there was no internet, and nothing beats that. It's just a great hobby and a great thing to do.
I think one of the most important clues that I ever got from St. Augustine actually came from my dad, who is in no way interested in this. Like, I presented this to my dad, like you were saying with fresh eyes. I kind of wanted, to have somebody who wasn't interested at all look at it. And he reminded me the very first lines in the St. Augustine, first chapter written in water. He reminded me that as soon as you walked in the Fountain of Youth in the 80s, there was, where there are now pictures, there was a painting of Florida, and written right in the Gulf of Mexico was the first chapter. I would have never known that clue unless my dad told me.
And that is so, I see, now I just got chills when you tell that story. Like, that is so cool. Goosebumps. That's so cool.
There's a free clue for St. Augustine Hunter.
There you go.
So if you wanted to know more about the background of Expedition Unknown, although I told them we were very close to St. Augustine, I knew there was a chance we wouldn't get permission. So, Al helped us with that. But they had me walk through the salve for St. Augustine to see, they wanted to judge it for themselves. And then they had me go through a salve for another city as a backup. And I picked the North Carolina one. I thought that was the next closest one. So that was the backup for Expedition Unknown. If we couldn't get permission for St. Augustine, we were going to probably do North Carolina.
There was a lot cut out, it seems like, from the episode. Was there anything cut out that could be of any help?
We went through pretty much all the clues of verse 9, which is the verse that most people think goes with St. Augustine, where we went through the near men with windrows, what shell, limestone, silver, and salt means. I explained about the goose pen or the duck pond, and you can still hear the honking. So they cut all of that out. So I was told that they're probably going to do a repacking of the episode at some point online where they're going to show the uncut version of a lot of stuff. So when that comes out, I guess we'll let you know.
We worked for like 9 hours till it was dark. I mean, we were there for 9 hours shooting that day, and they truncated it to, without commercials, about 8 minutes of footage. And out of all of it, the only questions I got beyond the treasure hunt were, did I have a prosthetic leg? Because I was wearing this compression sleeve on my leg at the time, because 2 days before we went down to shoot, I tore my calf muscle and I didn't want to be on camera on crutches or a cane. So I figured, oh, I'll look cool. And well, I look like a pirate on the treasure hunt with a peg leg. But I remember that, I remember just for if you wonder about people's motivation and stuff, the host was very, very into it. I think because it was gettable. It was possible. Like, I guess all these things he looks for, whether it's the Yeti or Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah, he never finds anything.
No, and that's what everybody said to me, John. They said, well,
that's actually how I sold the episode to them, is because when I was talking to the producers, I said, jokingly, he goes after these huge things from history and he can find a cask.
Yeah.
Especially with our help.
And he was so into it, and I joked with Brian about it afterwards. I said, it's kind of like, what would I call it, Brian? Like the Ginger and Marianne principle from Gilligan's Island. Like everybody always thought Ginger was so attractive. She was in that cocktail dress, and that was the big script. You be with Ginger, and that's to me is like Stonehenge and the Loch Ness Monster. But over time, you realize Marianne was kind of cute and really attractive, and there's something about her because he was gettable. Like there was something about her, like maybe the common man could get Marianne. So here's Josh Gates, and I remember after we left, we did St. Augustine, we did Cleveland. They were going up to Cleveland after that. I know Brian was super busy with work because the kind of work he does that week. And so they asked, and I was able to fly up to Cleveland to walk them through. But they went to Palancar after that. And just to give you a sense, I went home, and Josh Gates texts me out of nowhere. 2 days later, he goes, "Hey, it's Josh Gates here. I'm with Palancar. I haven't cracked him yet." I write back to hysterical. I love the real-time update. I asked him what Palancar would sell, the Cleveland painting, because he still has the paintings. I said, "Brian, you should have that over your fireplace. Like, that's your painting," right? And way back when, I think he was willing to sell, what was it, Brian, for $2,000 way back when?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and so now he said, "I talked to Palancar. He'll sell the Cleveland original for $7,000.
Oh,
The appreciation, right? I said, "You should have bought it when you had the chance." I said, "See if you can negotiate with him." I said, he writes back to me, "I feel like you might get him down to about 5,000. I got about 0 out of him." So he really pressed him that day, trying. So, and the point was, he was enamored, not as like a TV host who's trying to get ratings, but like a little kid. He sent me a few texts afterwards, like, "If you ever hear about anything, I'd love to, I'd love to be a part." So he got sucked in. And even the last line of the show, which was the one that gave me goosebumps, when he said, he goes, "Of all, I got beat today. I got smoked or something." He said, "But this is by far my favorite expedition I've ever done." I think it's because he realized how fun it is to go out and try to dig with your hands and find this buried treasure, and that it is gettable.
I think it's the only one that he was able to drive an IROC Z in. That's probably the real reason.
Brian did a really nice job of walking him through a lot of St. Augustine. I know we had talked about North Carolina too. I remember at the time they didn't give permission to dig in North Carolina, so it wasn't even. I remember he told us the Park Service wouldn't let them dig there, so that one was rooted out pretty quickly, which was disappointing. I think if you had, I don't know, anybody who'd want to watch all 9 hours, there was a lot of ground covered and just walking through things, certain tree placement that, George, I'm sure you've seen over and over and over. It's just conversation that was had, little bits and pieces from the guy who owns the park, telling us a bit of the history. Remember, Brian, he told us about the fountain that was there with the girl with the umbrella, right?
Yeah, we were going through everything. I even explained that I thought this was either the first or that St. Augustine was either the first or last place that Byron Price buried a cask, because he's calling them casks, and they mention cask on a sign there, and it seems to refer to it as a container, but it was actually referring to a helmet. That's what a cask is a helmet. CASQUE. And I think Byron Price just misunderstood it to mean container. And because it's written that way on the side.
Yes, Brian said, which was so brilliant when he saw that, because you're right. When you look up cask, nothing defines a cask as a treasure holder. It doesn't exist.
Right.
So you're right. Brian pointed that out when we stood there. He said, "Look, it's like he was standing and they show you the cask, the helmet, the conquistador, the helmet, and talking about it. And there's a story about something they shipped over at that time and the cask. And Brian said, I guarantee he was standing right here when he said, cask is kind of a cool term for treasure holder." And that's how it morphed into these casks that were buried. There's no question that's what happened. So
right. That's where he got the name from. Right. From that sign, from the Fountain of Youth. And it was probably either the first or the last place he was at that gave him the idea.
That is all the time we have for this episode of The Secret Podcast. Remember to visit us on our Facebook page. And thanks for joining us for this month's episode. Tune in next month when we will discuss the Houston portion of the puzzle with our special guests Brian Hill, formerly of the Houston Parks Department, an avid treasure hunter and longtime participant in The Secret, our good friend Will House down in Houston. Until next time, you take care now.
Tune in next time for another edition of Shhh, the Secret Podcast with your hosts, JM and Bernstein. Available on iTunes.